Hi, I'm Melanie, and you're watching the SVK All Women's Food Network. Today, we have two amazing guests, and I'm actually going to let them introduce themselves and share a little bit about who they are. And I will introduce both Dana and Lindsay. So, Dana, Lindsay, today what I'd like to do is instead of us introducing or myself introducing, which Chef Leanna normally joins me, she may crash us. Today, she's on the lunch rush hour as a chef, but she may join us within the middle of the broadcast. But I'd like each of you just to sort of introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about the business that you have. Dana, I'll start with you.
Okay, sure. I am. I'm an entrepreneur. I I own a frozen food business based in Vancouver, BC. It's called Brightside Foods. Started a couple of years ago. We make like vegetarian and vegan, like full meal-sized restaurant-style frozen burritos and something called the Pinto Pocket. Before that, I was a food writer with Lindsay Anderson. We did a couple of cookbook projects, one which was our own cookbook called Feast, Recipes and Stories from a Canadian Road Trip. Almost forgot the name there. So we published that in 2017, and I've just worked in so many different parts of the food industry, restaurants, cafes, all kinds of stuff. So, yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
And Lindsay, now I know you guys know each other, but tell me a little bit about sort of your business and entrepreneurship journey.
Sure. So I also have a background in food writing. To go way back, I did a master's of food culture and communications at a university in Italy about 13 years ago. And then after that, I was a food blogger for Tourism Richmond. So that was sort of my first main gig. And I ate at 365 restaurants in 365 days. And I wrote about each one. So that was a real, threw me into the deep end of food writing. I got a lot of experience in a short amount of time. And then it was around that time that I actually met Dana. And Dana and I wrote this cookbook, and it was based on a cross Canada road trip that we did a decade ago now. Actually, it'll be our sort of 10-year anniversary of that trip shortly. And we traveled to all 13 provinces and territories and wrote about Canadian food culture. So that was, a huge undertaking and something that we thought would actually be kind of a year-long project. And then 5 years later, we were still working together. And so that was really, really fun. And we both learned a lot. And then the last couple of years, I've been a freelance editor, content strategist, kind of doing all sorts of food writing when it comes to travel and with various companies, usually in the United States, helping them produce food content. And then my most recent project that started about a year ago is called Generational Fare. And it's a website that's dedicated to preserving old family recipes. So it's a place for people to share their stories around food and important food stories and recipes from their families, to share those, to be able to document it, kind of inspire people to ask the people in their families about their history, and food is a good sort of starting point to have those conversations. So that's what I do now.
So there's so many different questions I could go from there, but what my mind directs me to, I've lived almost all across on both coasts across Canada. I have my favorite cities, but when the two of you were on this road trip together, what an awesome idea. First of all, that sounds so much fun.
It was great.
What was your most favorite city that you went to that maybe you haven't been to before? And what did you learn about that city and the food and the culture there?
I'm curious to know if we have the same answer, Dana. What would yours be?
So many flashed in my head, but actually probably like Winnipeg or St. John's, Newfoundland kind of came up. What about you?
I was going to say St. John's, Newfoundland. Yeah, we were both obsessed with Newfoundland. Yeah.
What about St. John's that you guys just really were captured by?
Oh, so friendly.
Yeah.
Comically friendly. We got invited out multiple times to people's restaurants, and we'd go out. We got what is it called when you get
screeched in?
We got screeched in. and then ended up at somebody else's restaurant like 3 a.m. eating like moose charcuterie. And it's just really a very particular, there's a lot of interesting ingredients and like wild ingredients that chefs are working with there. And then it's just really beautiful, just like a beautiful place. Oh man, we actually got to go to Newfoundland twice. We went after the road trip, and then also Winnipeg as well. Dana, you can share about Winnipeg because I was obsessed with it too.
Yeah, it's just kind of like you don't totally expect such a like beautiful city. I've like driven through it before and had the same experience where you're like, it's so vibrant, like artistically and culturally. And I don't know, I think as someone who's like lived on both coasts, you kind of like don't think about the prairies all that much. And then you go there and you're like, oh my gosh, like it's gorgeous here. The architecture, the homes are beautiful. And then there's just like, it's the same kind of thing in Newfoundland where it's like a smaller community and like everybody just seems to like really like celebrate what they have and like gather around their like artistic and cultural people. Like it's just like, yeah, it felt like everyone in both of those cities like really like owned their city.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. A lot of pride in both.
Yeah, and it's just like an inspiring like vibe to be around.
Yeah. Well, I'm actually I was born in Winnipeg, and you know, like there's so much truth to people that are from Winnipeg. It truly is a friendly city. I know that Jay, who's our producer of this show, he's had such great positive experiences when he goes to Winnipeg. But on this trip that you guys took, or even just when you look in your entire career or as an entrepreneur, what's like the craziest thing or the strangest thing that has happened to you in each of your careers or your entrepreneurship journey?
Ooh, that's a great question. Go ahead.
I mean, I'm thinking, so Lindsay and I also collaborated on a project up north in Nunavut. We kind of took our same like collecting recipes and stories along a journey, and worked with the government of Nunavut to kind of collect like specific Nunavut stories. And like working up in the north is entirely different than working down here. Like the way that we gathered content is like we would land in that like a 900 person town, and then like in our parkas just kind of like start walking door to door. And I remember just thinking like, I'm in the middle of the Canadian Arctic, like just
without a clue.
Is that actually what you literally? That's what you did. Like you guys got off the plane.
Yeah.
And
there was a whole strategy to it because we learned like, you can't set up anything ahead of time. It's just not how it's culturally done. So we learned to basically be like, one of us has to make a friend on this flight because there are no taxis, there's no Uber, there's no nothing. And the airports are a trailer and it's not that close to town. So it'd be like, somebody has to make a friend on this flight because we need that person to get us into town. Hi, Leanna.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that is true. Somebody would make a friend on the plane, and then we'd get off the plane and be like, is there any way we could grab a ride into town? And then we'd get a ride into town. And then somebody had basically said like, yeah, we'd say, do you have any recipes in your family that somebody might be able to share? And they'd say, oh, my auntie knows how to ferment walrus. And then we'd say, okay, where should we go? How do we talk to your auntie? And they'd say, oh, she lives in the blue house by the hockey rink, and just let yourself in. And that threw us for a loop because we're like, we can't let ourselves in. We don't, but that's how you do it. You knock on the door, you open the door, you say hello, you introduce yourself. We often would get invited in for tea and bannock.
Wow.
Yeah, those we took. How many trips was it, Dana? Three trips. Sort of mainly like we started more in the eastern Nunavut, and then later trips were in the west, and then also a trip to Rankin Inlet. And so, boy, we learned so much. And yeah, we would find ourselves. One thing that I was thinking of is the trip to Bloody Falls. Do you remember in the Richard and June, they took us out to Bloody Falls, and we like literally, it was this like lovely old man that we met, and then he like loaded us up into the back of his sled and then just like took off across the Arctic tundra. And we're just like, okay, I guess this is what we're doing now. And took us to this place that was a traditional fishing ground called Bloody Falls because there'd been a battle there a couple centuries ago. And then he took us back to his like hunting cabin. We had hot chocolate and probably biscuits and just kind of constantly being like, wow, how the heck did we end up here? But this is our job right now. And that is like pretty darn cool.
And it was really cool. Like you would always end up with the same people. Like if you ended up in a town, you'd always get the same like 4 or 5 names for people who like are the best cooks or the best, you know? So you like, it was like totally confirmed. These are the people that you have to talk to like time and time again, which I thought was really cool.
And now go find them. And again, they're in the blue house by the hockey rink.
These are our cooks. Yeah, go talk.
Yeah.
Well, so that I've never actually been. That could probably be a story in itself, just to talk about that trip. What is your, well, like, I'm sure you got a lot of really great recipes from people across Canada, but what is one that maybe sort of was nostalgic for you? Because I think about my grandmothers who passed down their recipes. I'm of a German family descent, so there's a lot of different recipes that are very traditional, but is there anyone that was kind of lost? As Canadians, we sort of sometimes start to lose that traditional heritage of our meals that come from our background. So is there one that sort of stuck out to you and then, that was special, a certain recipe from someone that shared it with you?
I mean, definitely. Were there any Dutch ones, Dana, that actually in Ontario, we would have had, we had like boterkoek.
Or like the boterkoek at the Moncton Farmers Market in
Moncton Farmers Market, and also maybe the St. Jacobs Farmers Market. We had some good Dutch food. Dana is Dutch.
Yeah. I mean, my grandfather always had this like fried perch recipe that he made at every gathering. So actually that one didn't end up in the book, but it ended up on the blog, and then it's now part of
and it's all in generational fare. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
but there were some really specific regional recipes. Like one that comes to mind in New Brunswick is called poutine râpé, and it looks like poutine spelled out, but it is a traditional Acadian dish that we had never. You think that you know all the ways to prepare like meat and potatoes. It's like what could somebody show us that's new for potatoes? And it was basically how did she make the dough? Were the potatoes cooked already?
Yeah, it's boiled potatoes. I totally forget.
They end up basically looking like you almost make like a dough out of almost like mashed potatoes and some salt.
Oh, okay.
Oh, I know. You mix the mashed cooked potatoes with grated raw potato, and it makes this like starchy dough. And then you soak salt pork, chop it up, and then the filling is salt pork, and you basically put it together. It's like the size of a baseball. It looks like a giant snowball. And then you put them into a pot and you boil them for hours. And when they come out, the texture almost is that of like Chinese, like a sticky rice, almost like a mochi. Oh. And then they've got this delicious, salty, meaty filling, but then they'll often sprinkle brown sugar and black pepper over it. So this could be, this is a traditional Canadian dish, even though it's very specific to this one region. Never heard of it, never seen it again. And there's this lovely Acadian woman who made it for us in her house. And they were really tasty. And again, like you think, what could be done with potato, salt, and salt pork that feels different and new? And it blew our minds.
Yeah.
Really. And did you try food? Like, I mean, I would imagine if someone knocked on my door and said, hey, I'm traveling across Canada and collecting recipes across the country, I certainly would feel compelled to cook something for you. Did people make things for you when you were there?
Oh,
did you try everything?
Yeah. I mean, we ate so much. Like oftentimes we were being like hosted by Airbnbs, and they'd be like, this is our like signature breakfast, or this is our, these are my like muffins that the community loves. And it's like, it was really cool.
We got meat buns made for us when we were in Winnipeg and we were taking the train up to Churchill to go see the polar bears. And like the aunt of a friend made us sort of Mennonite style meat buns. It was basically like she made delicious like bread dough and then she filled it with this seasoned meat filling and then baked them. And she gave us this massive bag of meat buns and a container of yellow mustard.
Oh my
And we ate nothing but meat buns all the way to Churchill, which was a 2-day train ride. And we were thrilled. We just kept being like, oh my gosh, we get to have more meat buns now.
She thought to give us mustard. Like,
oh, yeah, we were just so excited about these meat buns. And then we tried making them later. And of course, they were not nearly as good. So that kind of thing happened a lot where it'd be like, take this on the road. Or we were at a farm in Alberta. And then when we left, they sent us with like banana bread and this and tons of their hascaps that they'd harvest. And it was very, I mean, if the trip taught us nothing more than how generous and kind and welcoming Canadian people are,
yeah,
it was worth it for that alone.
And like how much pride people find in like their food and their favorite foods. Like it is really the best connection point.
Yeah.
I love that you did that. And I think anybody that's listening will remember moments as kids, especially, you know, the prairies is made up of a lot of European settlers that, you know, came to Canada. And I grew up with my community. There were a lot of German, Polish, and Ukrainian families. And I grew up going to my friends' houses, and their grandmas and their moms and all the women and girls would get together and make pierogies till like 4 a.m. And, you know, my grandmother, like it's like lentil soup and sauerkraut, like all these things. And you made me think about like, I don't do that with our daughters. And I need to start doing that because there's a lot of traditional recipes that might get lost and end with me. So, you know, you've made me really think about that. Earlier, before we went live, Lindsay, you said you worked on a goat farm?
I did. I worked on a goat farm in Tuscany and I herded goats, though I had no herding experience prior to that. And it was a real tough learning curve, but I figured it out. And it was actually they had a whole herd of goats and then they made goat cheese at this little farm in Tuscany. It was just outside of a town called Greve in Chianti. And so, yeah, they got milked every morning and then I'd take the goats out for their endless meal of grass. And then I got to work in the dairy as well a little bit and learn about how they made all these cheeses. And then we would sell them at the farmer's market in town. It was quite the experience.
Did you, so what would be your one lesson? Like I always ask people, you know, what did you learn about something like you worked on a goat farm? So what did you learn about goats? Because I've learned a lot about chickens recently because we're looking at getting chickens and I didn't realize there's some unpleasant things about caring for chickens. What's your one takeaway about goats?
I was gonna say I did learn that like goats can be little jerks sometimes. It's like
yeah,
they're stubborn and the thing about herding goats in Tuscany is that it's not like there's just like endless amounts of space for them to roam. It's all parceled off, right? Into there's like this vineyard and then there's this property and there's another vineyard and then here's a garden and then here's another farm and right? It's like along these lines that were set in like medieval times. So trying to get a herd of goats to be like, you can't go there, but you have to go here. And I don't want you feeding on the grapes in that vineyard. I learned that I'm faster than I thought I was because I was constantly hustling around to be like, not over there, not over there. We're going here. They're funny. Like, and like little goats are hilarious. Every time they like jump off of a hill, they'll have to kick back and they're goofy. So yeah, I learned pretty quickly about like goat psychology in a way that I never thought I would. There was also a literal billy goat named Biondo, which means blonde because he was this like massive blonde billy goat and he's huge and like there's one billy goat and then it's just like a herd of female goats and like it didn't take very long before I figured out like Biondo thought of me as like one of the female goats because we'd go out, and if a man joined us, he'd usually like attack the man, and it would be like, oh, okie dokie. So if the man was talking to me, Biondo would go after the man. So, but I sure do love goat cheese. It was worth it for the goat cheese.
So do I. I eat a lot of it. On that topic of food, Dana, I was going to ask you first thing. So what's your favorite snack or meal at Brightside? And then I also wanted to ask you, what do you love about your customers? Because customers are everything to an entrepreneur.
Yeah. Well, my favorite meal that we have is called the Pinto Pocket.
Okay.
Like refried beans and cheese, and then a really, really awesome locally made tortilla. It's just a 4-ingredient tortilla. It's super stretchy. It like crisps up super nicely. And it's like a really, really simple product, but like everything in it is really good, and it just adds up to like more than what it is. It's like,
yeah,
they're like creamy and seasoned and like so flavorful. And the cheese is like stretchy and delicious. And then the tortilla like brings it next level.
I eat like 3 of these a week.
You have to put sour cream on it. You have to.
Yeah, sour cream or avocado with a bit of lime. It honestly goes well with every dip. Like we have this habanero sauce, or just like Valentina's sauce, or it's really good. But sour cream is really good. And then our customers. So it's interesting. I've been in the restaurant industry a long time, and then this is. We started this during the pandemic as like a way to, provide meal options for people at home, and it kind of grew there. So the first year, part of like how you grow a food brand is that you go into grocery stores and you demo and all of that. And so the first year we weren't doing that because it was COVID, and so we were so disconnected from our customers. And then last year we started doing a ton of like in-person events and demoing like crazy and all of that. And it was like so refreshing to like talk to people face to face about the food that you're serving them again. Like it was like, oh, no idea how much I was missing this component from like growing a brand. Cause it's like actually seeing people eat the food is what gives you like the confidence and the like, like, oh, this is good. And people like this. And people are saying that they need this. Like, we need easy meals. We need things that taste good. And it's like, okay, like it's like the feedback part that you really, really need. And so most of where I interact with customers is at markets and grocery stores and stuff like that. And what do I love? What do I love about them? It's like such a diverse like range of customers, but I don't know. I just really like what happens when like someone eats a sample of food that they enjoy, and then they kind of like, like the body language changes, and then they're like, what else I tried is blah, 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 blah. Or like, like it's just kind of like, it's just an instant disarming and connection point. It's like, we've shared a bite of food now.
Yeah.
And like, it's just kind of like, I love how necessary food is. Like we eat 3 meals a day, and we need it, but then it's often so often you get like on autopilot, or you're just like putting whatever in your mouth. And then when people just like stop and like intentionally taste a bite of food.
Yeah. I think, you kind of just made me think of something. I don't know if you know about the 5 love languages, but I think anyone I know that's in the restaurant industry that creates food and art and meals, their love language is acts of service. Listening to you describe the way you feel and watching your customers eat your food, it's no different. Like I think about when I cook a meal for my family and I watch them bite into it, and they're like they're making all those noises. And you said like the body language, they say it's really good. Yeah. And that is so satisfying. It's like, and I always say like I made that with love, but there's so much truth to that. Anyone that enjoys cooking for others, it's so true. So, I mean, both of you, are entrepreneurs in this similar industries. What would be like, if I'm a female entrepreneur wanting to get into the restaurant or, author industry related to food, what is some advice that you would give to somebody just starting out? Because there's certainly days where you have highs, And then there's days you have lows because you're not working for a major organization where other people can help pick up the pieces. So just before we close, what's one piece of advice that you'd want to give to a young female entrepreneur getting into the similar industries as both of you?
For me, I would say, first of all, don't worry if you don't know everything. That can be, I think, can be a barrier sometimes to women in particular, because we like to, at least I know that I often like to feel like I've got everything figured out. I've got my feet under me entirely before I go in and do something new. And sometimes you just have to plan as best as you can, but then just go for it and be like, there's a bunch of bridges that I'm going to have to cross and I might not know what they look like, but I will figure it out when I get to them.
Yeah.
So don't worry if you don't have it all figured out ahead of time. It's, charge forward with some confidence and figure it out as you go. And then I would also say it's pretty great having, don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to reach out to people. If you're able to find a mentor, that's fantastic. Or somebody that you can bounce things off of. So for example, I co-founded Generational Fair with somebody, but I'm basically running it. So sometimes it can be kind of a quiet world for me working on Generational Fair, and I'm interacting with people, but it's all online. But I've got Dana, who, we worked together for 5 years and we don't technically work together anymore, but I still can go to Dana and say, what do you think about this? Does that sound good? Would you, I can ask her for advice. I can bounce all of these ideas off of her. I trust her. And so, I might be working by myself, but I don't feel alone at all.
That's important. That feeling of, and I talk to entrepreneurs every day, and there are those days where they just feel so alone. Dana, what about you? What advice do you have?
I feel like, if you're just starting out, just like get a job in the industry that you want to be in. Like there's so much of like where I've ended up is from like meeting people along the way, having great coworkers, having a friendship that turns into a business partnership. And, like I have my position now, I own this business with 2 other people who I worked for several years. So like, it was like, never did I think, I'm going to start working here. And then in 6 years, I'll end up, partnering with them on another project. It was just kind of like, I like where I am. Like this company that I'm working for is really great. I like these people. And like, I'm working on my own thing now. And, it just kind of like, just be open to like what opportunities are currently available, what opportunities like you can do right now. And then I think another big one that I'm really learning is that rest is important. Oh. So like, you also need to have something like, a business can take over your entire mind and your entire life. And you have to have something that you do that is not business related. And you need to have like joy outlets in your life. Like for me, like the highs and lows of the business are like major. And it's also part of it. That part of it I enjoy. Like I like the rush and then I like the chaos and like, but it also is really, really hard. And I think it's just really important to be able to like totally unplug from something. And like Lindsay and I just like drove out to a beautiful oceanfront place and made dinner the other night, and it took all of like 5 hours, but it was like, this is actually us like getting away from our like lives and our busy brains. And we're just literally staring at the ocean while we're like chatting over
eating
some
pasta.
Pasta.
Yeah. And didn't talk about work.
Talk about work. It's so hard not to, isn't it?
But I think you just have to like, even if it's like I go for a run every day, or like you have to have something that you do that like takes you out of your brain.
Yeah. Hustle culture can be toxic if you are in like you every day, this, that. It's like, it doesn't, if it's all day, every day, you'll burn out, and that's not going to help anybody.
Yeah. We get so addicted to that fear of missing out. It's so true. I even see it in like children today, same thing. Like we're passing that down, and we have to sort of like end that so that they don't carry on with that type of work anxieties. It's interesting what you said before we wrap up, but I don't know if you know this, but statistics are showing that women are leading the way for leaving their corporate jobs and becoming entrepreneurs. And some of what you said is so realistic right now, because a lot of people have had careers at big organizations where they have learned the footprint and everything they need to know about the industry, as you said, Dana, and then it helps them actually become more successful when they become an entrepreneur themselves. So that's, both of you had really great advice. Thank you for joining us today. Unfortunately, Leanna had some kind of technical issues, so she popped in, showed her face, and then dropped off, but she will be on next month's show in July. If you guys happen to know anyone that you think would make a great guest, let us know. And if you're watching the show and you would like to be on the show for July, just reach out to myself or Leanna or Jay, and you can find us on LinkedIn. Thank you so much, Lindsay and Dana, for joining us.
Thanks,
it was
Melanie.
great meeting you.
Great meeting you too.
Take care.